I want to take the last period of this interview to return to some really important questions about leadership, about your leadership in particular, and back to the immediate moment we face. Very, very widespread in society today is the notion, especially among progressive people, decent people, young people who want positive change, that leadership is a bad thing. And I wonder if you could speak about what is leadership and what is communist leadership in particular, and why should people follow your leadership?
Well, first of all, let's get that one thing straight. People are being led all the time by forces that are standing above them, and in effect, in real terms, dictating to them. Terms are being set for them and dictated to them by the very operation of the system. It hems people in and forces them in all kinds of ways to do all kinds of things, and prevents them from doing all kinds of things. So the idea that you're somehow existing in a vacuum, not being led, and no terms are being set for your life, is completely contrary to the essential reality. So that's people are being led all the time. That's the first thing, and people follow leaders all the time. They idolize all these bourgeois leaders and cultural figures, including ones who are actually representative of and putting forth terrible things. People follow them and idealize them all the time. You can go, look at the popular culture, and think about people, that are idolized and may have millions of followers at any given time. Politicians, people in the popular culture, influencers, and what all. So that's one thing that has to be understood. Leadership, is or should be a process that enables people. It goes back to the whole point about science, too. It enables people to understand the world as it actually is, where the interests of the masses of humanity, of which they are a part, actually lie, actually are, and how to go about transforming things in accordance with those interests. That's the fundamental thing of leadership. It proceeds according to a certain scientific method. It understands, leadership, correct leadership, it involves an understanding of learning from people, but as we've been talking about, also struggling with people to get them to have a scientific understanding and approach, so that it's not just a handful, but a growing number of people who are approaching the world and the question of changing the world in accordance with how the world actually is, the way it needs to be changed in order to be in line with the interests of the great masses of people in the world, and how to go about making that happen. That's what leadership, and in particular communist leadership, is. So that's the answer to that, in basic terms, to that question. As for why people should follow my leadership, it comes down to, this is what I'm setting out to do, and have been setting out to do for decades now, is what I just described. Enabling people to, more and more deeply and in a living way, understand the reality that that they're part of. How this reality is setting the terms, not just for them, but for much greater numbers of people, and ultimately for humanity as a whole, where this all needs to go in order for human beings to be able to fully give expression to their humanity, if you want to put it that way, and how to go about making that a reality, and enabling growing numbers of people to take up and apply the same scientific method, and then in turn lead others to do the same. So this is what my life, for a complex of reasons, which we won't get all into now, but this is what my life's been about for decades. And, people, let me put it this way. I think, I said before, I consider myself, a friend of the masses of people. When I was shaped by my, personal and deep relations with people who were brutally and bitterly oppressed under this system. And, these were friends of mine, literally and directly, but also by extension. This extended to people much more broadly that were in the same situation. And I've considered myself I consider them a friend to me, and I consider them myself their friend. And this, as the more I've learned about the conditions of the masses of people in the world as a whole, the more this has been extended to that orientation has been extended that way. There's a lot of things that go into that, including, ironically, some of my religious upbringing is fed into that. Even though I transformed that thinking, became an atheist, the basic idea that you should care about other people and not just yourself, which I did get largely from my religious parents and my mother especially, but my father as well. That has also, been part of what's motivated me. And then I've come to understand the world in a more scientific way, and it hasn't lessened the sense that you should care about people. It's given me a much broader sense of that. And the more I've continued to learn, the broader, and the deeper that orientation has become. And that's how I'm proceeding. Look, a lot of what I'm saying is corny. I know somebody listened to the band International one time and was overheard saying, "How much sincerity can you fake?" And this is a cynicism that's that's drilled into people because they live under a system that conditions and trains and requires people to be cynical, to set out, to just go for self, at the expense of anybody that gets in your way. Even, maybe you have a small circle of people you care about, but beyond that, anybody that gets in your way, you have to move them out of the way in pursuing your, whatever it is you're set out to do for you individually and the small circle you're part of. And, and people look at the leaders that are put forward, even though while they idolize some of them and idealize some of them, they still understand on a certain level or have a sense these people are, just out for themselves in a narrow sense, but also that are, cynically maneuvering and operating in the, however they understand it, in the interests of what is and in maintaining what is, and in getting over on other people. This is the culture, this is the way people, sense. Even if they don't understand scientifically, they sense that this is the way people, especially people who put themselves forward as leaders, proceed in the world. And that's because the people who are promoted as leaders in this system are reflections. They are reflections of what the system is all about. They are, they correspond to how the system operates, or they'll be moved aside. So, people become cynical because they've heard, many people come forward as so-called leaders, saying one thing and doing another, talking in grandiose terms, but then being about the most narrow and even vicious things. So people become cynical, but, you have to step back that you have to evaluate things on, once again, it's a matter of science, evaluate things on the basis of what they actually are. What do people actually do? What does it actually tell you about the world? Where would it actually lead if you take up what people are saying and go with it and lead other people to go with it? That's how you evaluate leadership. I could put it another way, and this I know will just feed cynicism and, oh, that's corny and so on and so forth. But I look upon what I'm doing as, my giving back to the masses of people who taught me a tremendous amount as I was coming up. Even though they didn't teach me the science, they taught me a tremendous amount about what people go through and, what is so unnecessary for people to have to be put through. I learned a lot about that from other people. And I view, and then as I said, I've learned, whole broader dimensions of that, even on a worldwide level, about the masses of people in the world. And I regard what I'm doing as giving back to those people who have, taught me that, who led me, even though they didn't take me by the hand or push me in the back and say, go this way, they impelled me in a certain direction. This is injustice. This is oppressive. This is intolerable. So what are you going to do about it, Bobby? When I was young. So, this is how I view what I'm doing. It's giving back. And, there's the old saying from the Trojan War, You better stare a gift horse in the mouth. Okay, concretely examine it. Look at what I'm advocating. Look at the methods and the approach I'm proceeding on. Look what I'm calling for. Look what I'm saying has to be done. Look what I'm saying how it can be done. Look what I'm saying. Look at what I'm saying who has to do this and how they have to do it. Evaluate it on the basis of what it actually is, and then decide, is this where things need to go? And if so, then take it up, follow it, but take it up and lead other people to take it up.
The cynicism that you're describing, the thing you quoted about the band Outer National, the way that people view, leadership and your leadership in general, it's just such a burden and a weight on people. The cynicism, it's a blanket over their aspirations, and it's really important to hear you speak about it that way. I wanted to ask you